Well, hello and welcome to the Living and Studying Q&A with University College. My name is Hannah and I am the Schools Liaison and Access Officer here at University College, or Univ as we are often known for short. If you would like to ask any questions today of our wonderful tutors who are joining us for the next 45 minutes, you'll be able to pop them, if you're watching this live, into the box, which should be kind of roughly next to this live stream. Or if you are watching afterwards as a recording, then you can also get in contact with us via our website, and I will also share our email address at the end where you can contact me and I'll get back to you as fast as I can. So to begin with, I'm going to ask our wonderful tutors to introduce themselves, just because this is the clockwise direction on my screen. Andrew, is it okay if I come to you, then Nick, then Laura? And would you mind sort of introducing yourself, your role at Univ, and maybe something, your favourite thing about Univ, or a thing that you think is distinctive about University College?
Thanks, Hannah. I'm very happy to start. Hello, everyone. It's great to have you joining us today. I'm Andrew Bell. I'm the senior tutor at Univ, which means I've got a general overall responsibility for all academic matters. My background is history, and I do still teach a bit of history, which I'd be pleased to talk to you about. But really, I'm here thinking about the perspective of admissions and the academic experience as a whole. Very much looking forward to answering your questions. I'm not going to give you a hard sell on the college, but what I am going to say is I feel extremely fortunate to be working at this university, but within this particular college, which I find to be hugely stimulating, brilliant students and fabulous colleagues. So looking forward to speaking to you.
Hi, I suppose I'm next. My name's Nick Young. I'm the psychology tutor at Univ, and that means I tutor students in experimental psychology, psychology, philosophy and linguistics, biomedical sciences, and a little bit for the students studying medicine as well. Thinking about my favourite thing about Univ, I think I'm going to say the students. I think we've just come to the end of what's been a difficult, I think at times challenging, interesting academic year, and I think it's really with the times where the students have been at home and studying from home, and I think it's really brought home to me how much I value being around students and interacting with the students in tutorials, in lectures this year, more than many other years. I've always loved teaching here, but I think really appreciating what the students bring and to my job and my enjoyment of the subject. So I'm going to say that for today.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura. I'm one of the English tutors at Univ. I'm the medievalist, which means I teach the really exciting early materials, so think Beowulf, dragons, heroes, Knights of the Round Table, Chaucer, all that kind of thing. And my favourite thing about Univ, definitely the students. I completely agree with Nick. We've had a really challenging year, but actually a really fantastic one. I've been teaching at Univ for more years than I can count now, actually. And every year, even though I'm teaching the same texts, working on similar kinds of material with the students, every year is exciting and different, and I learn something new from the new group of students that I'm teaching. So it's a really fantastic place to be. Univ does have a reputation for being a very friendly, welcoming college, and that really is true across the board, students, colleagues and staff. I'm really lucky to be at Univ.
Thank you. So to start off with, there's a couple of questions around choosing a college, and some of them are around what somebody asked. Should you try and pick a college because you think you've got similar academic interests to some of the tutors in your subject? And there's relatedly someone asking, does the college you apply to kind of impact your chances of being offered a place at Oxford? Would anybody like to come in to begin with on that one?
I can say something briefly about the second part of that question, if you like, Hannah, the aspect of whether your college choice has an impact on your chances of getting in. It's a reasonable question to ask. You know, when you apply to university, you're acting on the basis of imperfect information, and you want to know more so that you can make the most informed choice possible. I think the really important thing you need to think about has to do with your subject. Getting the right subject choice is the real driver of success in your future experience. When it comes to choosing college, you really can act on preference and you don't need to worry about any mysterious data. The reason I say that is because in every subject across the university, we operate a pretty sophisticated moderation system, which means that if a really great student applies to a college that happens to be oversubscribed, that student is going to be considered by all the other colleges. And likewise, putting it a bit negatively, if there's somebody who is, quite, by Oxford standards, less than compelling in their application, then even if they happen to have applied to a college that doesn't have many applicants, well, that college is going to go looking at all the other strong people from elsewhere. So there's a kind of hydraulic movement between colleges. And what that means from your point of view is that we're going to look at you across the collegiate university rather than just in the context of one college to try and make sure you get a place somewhere. And so the college you choose in the first instance, it's not a driver of your future success. The way I might encourage you to think about it, if you choose a college, is to say to yourself, okay, this is my first choice college, but I recognise I might in fact get into any one of the others. And of course, if you don't want to choose, you can make what's called an open application, and that won't have an impact either way on your chances of getting in, not least because in quite a lot of subjects, the tutors who are assessing your application, they don't even know which college you applied to. I'll let others say something on the role that academic preference and particular interests of tutors might play in the decisions that you make.
I'll come in on that question. Thanks, Andrew. To some extent, the college choice, in a way, for a subject like English or other humanities, doesn't matter in the sense that you'll be following, broadly speaking, the same core courses and papers, whichever college you go to, but you will be frequently in the first year, and as you move through your degree, taught in tutorials within your college. So if you came to Univ to do English, you would be taught by me in your first and second years. But what also happens is that you'll be sent out to other colleges to be taught by other experts in your field. There are also courses that are taught more centrally in the faculty, in English particularly in your third year. So you'll be exposed to a range of exciting academics within your college setting, but also in the faculty. So the English faculty is made up of all of the English tutors across the colleges. So to some extent, you'll still be following the same course as your peers. And one of the really exciting things about studying at Oxford is that in consultation with your tutors, you get a certain amount of choice about what you'd like to study on a week-by-week basis within the particular topic or course that you're doing. Now, that can mean that within your college, you might be working with particular tutors who have certain kinds of expertise. I work on late medieval mystics, for example, so I'll often offer that as an opportunity for my students. So there's a certain amount of that kind of linkage between you and the experts within your college. But as Andrew's already said, you may well be interviewed by another college. So it's really not the be all and end all. You'll have a fantastic opportunity whichever college you're at, but certainly it is something to consider when you're choosing colleges. See what the tutors might be working on. Are they working on things that particularly fit within your interests?
Yeah, I think I just agree with all of those things. I think in psychology, certainly in terms of the teaching that you get, it doesn't really matter what college you apply to. I think looking at what the interest of the tutor is a good reason as any to choose a college. But equally, you could look at you quite fancy living close to the town centre or a bit further out. You might like to live in kind of crazy 17th century buildings or not. Like, I think that all of those reasons are equally good as and Andrew said at the start. I think I'm much more interested in fact, I'm only interested in why people are choosing the subject they choose when they apply to it. I'm not, we don't ask people why they apply to you, or I certainly don't ask people why they apply to Univ. I'd be surprised if anyone does. But we would be very interested in why you've applied for the course.
Perfect, thank you. You've also had a couple of questions coming in that are sort of related to student well-being and support, whether that's sort of mental health support or like academic support as well. And there was also a question about kind of, what's in place to help a student if they are perhaps struggling with a particular topic, or finding something academically challenging. So perhaps from the tutor's perspective, maybe if I come to Laura, if that's okay to start with, what's your perspective on the support for students at Univ?
There's a great deal of support available across sort of different kinds of areas. So we have an amazing welfare team that are really fantastic, and there's all sorts of personal support available there. But also from the academic point of view, so from my point of view, we work very closely with the students. And if you're having difficulties with a particular topic, that's certainly something that you can, that a student will work through with us. I think the sort of crucial thing that I'd like to emphasize is that, we're very aware of the difficulties and challenges that students are facing, particularly given the last couple of years with COVID and what you've all been going through. So, we have been adapting our own teaching and our own methods to try to account for that and to offer additional support, particularly in that transition from A-level and school to a university setting. So, for example, in English, I run various study skills sessions that are all about how to interpret a reading list. What does it mean when I say write an essay? What is a tutorial? And many of my colleagues in the humanities, and of course in the other subjects too in the college, will be doing similar things. We're not expecting you to arrive and know exactly what you're doing. There's plenty of kind of scaffolding there to help you at the beginning. And we are a friendly, informal kind of college. We want students to be able to tell us what they're struggling with, and we will help them as needed. I often have worked with students where they've submitted a plan for their essay before the tutorial, and I've given them extra guidance. We've emailed about things, so you're not sort of out left out at sea struggling. We're absolutely committed to working with students individually, and because we have quite small year groups, we have the sort of time and ability to do that, and we're completely committed to supporting your education and helping you to do the best that you can in your personal circumstances. Nick, if you want.
Yeah, I just pick up on some of those themes really. I think thinking about academic support in particular, we at the core, at the heart of the teaching across all the subjects here at Oxford is tutorials. So a lot of the teaching is centralized, so you might go to lectures with students from across the university, but a lot of the teaching is also delivered in these small group tutorials where there might be 2 or 3 or a small handful of students together with a tutor. And I think one of the things I've really come to appreciate this year, I'm referring back again to the unusual year that we've had, is what a brilliant system that is. I mean, I think generally students say that the tutorials have been a fantastic part of their education. I mean, it's something we enjoy. But I think it's just as well as being a really rich experience, it's very robust and flexible. And so I think one of the things it allows you to do is really tailor the teaching to the needs of individual students, because you're there in a room with them, you see them week after week. If there's a topic people are struggling with, you can work on it and you can refer back to it and build on it in future weeks. And as Laura said, I mean, we don't just teach content in tutorials. A really important part of that is understanding our students, what their strengths are, what the challenges that they're dealing with academically and otherwise, and sort of really, particularly on the academic side, sort of working through and building up a relationship. So you actually we know our students. We kind of we see how they've developed in throughout the course academically, and we can really work on that. So actually, and that's been really important this year, where I think lots of people have been having unusual challenges, and and there've been challenges in the way adapting the way we teach to a format like this online. And I think that format has been really brilliant, and it continues to be. And it's a bit, historically, it's been really important to us. And I think I've really appreciated it this year again, in terms of being able to provide that support and see what sorts of things people are dealing with in the year.
Nick and Laura have been speaking with real feeling and real commitment about how they understand their teaching role and how they see the style of teaching we have here is feeding into student progress and the student experience and student wellbeing. And I hear that echoed among absolutely all of my colleagues. I'm always struck by how very involved in the students' teaching and learning, in each individual student's teaching and learning experience, tutors are. And I mean, it is disproportionately in excess of what is able to be offered in the majority of universities. And I'm staggered by it each week anew. I'm just going to nod in a different direction. I'm sure there will be more questions on this later on, but let me just mention, as Laura touched on, we do have a great disability advisory service in the university, which we're fully plugged into via a really professional welfare and disability advisor who works with students and tutors alike. We also have, as Laura said, a great welfare team which can offer both entirely informal support but also slightly more formal and ongoing support. And then also there's the pretty extensive financial support package which is available both on a means tested basis for UK students but also on a sort of ad hoc basis for the unexpected for absolutely all students across the board. And it might well be that that comes up later in discussion.
Thank you. We've actually sort of touched on, I think, one of the questions, another of the questions that just come up, which was particularly around kind of what to expect from tutorials, but also was asking about if you're somebody who's a bit more shy or a bit more quiet, can the tutorial system be for you? And what would you perhaps say to students who were perhaps, perhaps find that sounds like quite an exciting, but also quite an intense form of teaching? So, what might you say to reassure students for whom that would be a very new style of learning for them? If it's okay, I might start back with Laura again, if that's all right.
Absolutely fine. It is in many ways a really intense and sort of focused moment, the tutorial, but as Nick said, it is this really flexible form. I think that one of the benefits of us seeing the students so regularly is that you do get to know them quite quickly, and we always do our best to make the tutorial environment relaxed, somewhere that students can feel comfortable about discussing their ideas. And I think the key thing to emphasize, particularly for humanities students, they're bringing their essay to the tutorial. The tutorial starts sort of at where the students are at, what you've managed to do in your week. This is your essay, this is where you've got to, and the tutorial is an opportunity to develop the work that you've done in conversation with your tutor, often with a tutorial partner as well. And the idea is that it's always a work in progress. We appreciate that you can't write, a sort of perfect essay in a week. This is where you've got to, and that's something that we're going to work on, both in terms of the content and the style of the essay. So we will be paying quite close attention to it, but the aim is always to help the student develop, to help them develop their ideas, you often move off in really quite different and exciting directions in a tutorial. No one tutorial is the same. If you've got a student that, I certainly have had students who are shy, and students often are shy when they first arrive at university, but the tutorial system is a sort of friendly and tailored form, and we hope that we make the discussions sort of informal as well as challenging and intellectually exciting. Nick, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I pick up a lot on those points. I think there's certainly there's a range of ways students deal with tutorials. Like as a tutor, I have to kind of manage to kind of in terms of getting them to speak a bit less sometimes, and sometimes drawing people out. But I think that idea of point Laura was making, it's a conversation, I think, is really natural, and in any conversation people take different roles. I think part of my job is if as a tutor is to make sure that people who maybe initially feel a bit less confident feel that there's something to be gained by bringing their views up, and I think that's really important in terms of people realizing that there's the opportunity there. So as a tutor, I don't worry if people aren't talking, if they're in a given, because you can often learn a lot by listening to a discussion, listening to what questions are being asked and how they're being answered. And that's completely fine. I think what the conversation I have with students, if I feel like they are very quiet, might be around just making sure that they're comfortable, that that they realize that the opportunity that's there is that it's their opportunity to have their questions answered. And as a tutor, my job is to kind of help them work through the questions they have, the challenges they're facing academically, and if they're not saying stuff and answering questions, then it makes it much harder for me to judge. I mean, again, I get their essays, and so I can bring people out by sort of discussing that. But I think for me, it's not about making people talk for the sake of it. It's just, for me, it's if a student's not talking a lot, or seems too shy, maybe to benefit from the conversation in terms of having their views heard, and getting feedback on those, then that's something I tend to discuss with the students and work on and find ways. But I think because it's a flexible conversation, and there's only, for me, quite easy to manage that. It's not like, it's very different from what to do if people are putting their hands up in a seminar with 20 people or in a lecture with 100 people. There's 3 of us there, and I find it relatively, it's not often a problem bringing people out because it's a nice environment. And I think a final thing to say, if I'm not going on too long, is about, I think another part of the conversation I have with students quite often is that one of the things I love about teaching at Oxford and the tutorial system, and the way, for example, people are writing essays for each tutorial, but they don't count to anything except other than the student's development, is that it's in many ways a really safe environment in which to try this out. So each tutorial is just a private discussion among 3 people or 4 people, or sometimes 2, but where you've really got the opportunity to kind of talk through your ideas, get feedback on them, work them through, and nothing hinges on it. There's not a presentation to lots of people where you're being judged, and there are no marks involved. And actually that makes it a really, really safe place to develop that skill. And again, that's part of that opportunity that you've got, is this opportunity to work through your ideas, to get feedback on them. And I just think that's really valuable and fantastic, and can benefit people often who kind of can build confidence that way, because you can try out speaking up, suggesting ideas, saying what you think in that environment. And then, when you get feedback on it and people react to it and build on it, your tutors and your other students, that can be a really good way of actually building that confidence that you can then take to other situations where maybe it feels more obviously pressured, where there's, mark depending on it, or, whatever out there in the world.
I can just come back in and say that Nick's absolutely right about that, and that the tutorial, very much is about, and is interested in, the process. So often when my students will come in, we won't get straight into the content of the essay. I'll say, how's it gone this week? How did you find the essay question that you chose? How did the reading go? Where were the challenges? Where was the excitement in the topic? And so we're just as interested in that process of helping students to become independent learners, and to be able to do their own research and take ownership over their own writing. I've had students I've been working with this year who have been really developing quite exciting and different styles of writing, which, as Nick says, because we can do that in a tutorial, that's really fantastic. And there are all kinds of writing techniques we can use to help students to sort of open up that voice, and open their own and really own their own voice as a literary critic. And it's really exciting.
Thank you. I think that was a really great insight into not only what tutorials are like, but actually what they're intended to do, which I think can sometimes get lost in conversations about what is a tutorial, for instance. We've also had quite a few questions today. I know Nick, you've mentioned that this past year it's been very difficult on university students and school students. So there've been a couple of questions around, and maybe I'll come to Andrew to begin with this, but how Oxford colleges and Oxford tutors will be taking into account and thinking about the ways that the circumstances of the past year have impacted students, their applications, and their opportunities to explore their subjects, both in school and beyond.
Thanks, Hannah. Sure, I can say a couple of things on that. We've touched on this several times already today. it's been a very difficult year for everyone, and for some people it's been exceptionally difficult, either for personal reasons or for practical reasons to do with what they've been able to access and the kind of support that they might ordinarily have received but haven't in recent times. I'm sure everyone's learning has taken a knock, and for some people it could have been a really, really very serious knock. We know that, we've seen it in some of our own students, and we don't doubt that in some of the students who are going to come to us next year and the year after and the year after that, they're going to be living with the legacy of 15, 16 months of academic and personal disruption, and possibly more than that. And if I can just say very briefly, I mean, I just feel dreadful for young people who have lived through this, because, you know, it's come at a really bad time for you, and I'm really very, very sorry about that. In terms of what we're expecting to do in the coming admissions round and in the admissions round after that, I guess there are 2 or 3 different things to say. The first is that, broadly speaking, we are working on the assumption that everybody we meet, whether we're meeting them as a paper application, as a test submission or as interview, will have experienced some disruption which might be unevenly distributed across their school curriculum. So there might conceivably be gaps, maybe minor gaps, maybe major gaps. And even though this is true in every year, we're really, really going to be asking ourselves the question, not what does this person know, but what potential has this person got to engage effectively in the very supportive teaching and learning environment that we've got to offer here at Oxford. So in other words, we're not going to be saying, you know, can we trip you up on something that in a normal year you should have covered? We're going to be saying, in the things that you have been able to do, can we see the potential for you to go on to succeed really well? And that will happen in all sorts of really small and enmeshed ways throughout the whole process. It's also the case that last year and going forward into this year, we're calibrating very carefully our final decisions when A-level results are released, and we'll be doing that, I'm sure, for a couple of years into the future, when we're looking both A-levels but also the GCSEs and other qualifications that people are bringing with them. You know, we're looking at the data nationwide, and we're looking to see what's happening to make sure that the kind of ranking and the calibrations that we're using are real world to a given year's experience, and hopefully to a given school's experience as well, rather than just assuming that there's some ideal of performance that exists there out in the world and that you're going to be measured against that. But I think the really, really important thing actually has to do with the transition into university study. And that's where everything that Nick and Laura have been talking about for the last few minutes really, really kicks in. The kind of very tailored, individual, personalised teaching response that the tutorial permits us to give us. And as teachers, we're really fortunate to be able to work in that environment, just as I hope that you as future students think that maybe you'd be fortunate too. You know, that actually permits us a lot of flexibility to respond to the strengths, but also the weaknesses that individuals might present with, the areas of expertise that our students will have, but also the things that we might expect them to have encountered in a normal year, but actually they've missed out on. We've got a sense of what some of those will be, and we're pretty well placed to do something about it. Now, I realise what I'm saying here is giving you is offering you quite a lot of quite general comments in which I'm kind of saying, look, trust me, we've got your back, it's going to be okay. But the truth of it is that I want to say to you, trust me, we've got your back. We want you to succeed. We know that some of the very best students we're going to admit down the line are going to be people who've had a bad time. And it's in our interests to support those people through to becoming successful students here.
Would Laura or Nick, was there anything you would like to add sort of from a subject perspective? Don't feel that you have to, but just if you would like to add anything there, please do.
Just that Andrew's focus on potential is absolutely key, and that's, you know, really one of the sort of things that we're looking at during admissions, and something that we're really focusing on when students are actually here. You know, constantly developing their potential and working with them. And, you know, we've had this experience over the last year of teaching students who had a very disrupted final year of A-levels. And, you know, from my experience this year with my current first years is that they've done absolutely magnificent work, and that the challenges that they faced individually and as a group, we've been able to address as best we can. And you know, just to echo some of the things Nick was saying at the beginning, I've had an absolutely fantastic year. I'm hugely proud of the work that my students have produced. I've had conversations with them and read essays from them that have changed my views on texts, and it's been absolutely magnificent. So, you know, I have no doubt that, you know, the students that we will admit, you know, they have incredible potential, and will continue to show that and develop that within the tutorial system. And we are enormously aware of how challenging the last year or so has been, and how it will continue to be. You know, that's something that we're really committed to focusing on and helping students with.
Thank you.
Just to add one thing that reflects a subject perspective on at the interview admissions and application process, I suppose, is that it's really considered a subject level, and that we put a lot of time and effort into that process of identifying the people with the most potential to kind of get the most out of the degree here and of the degree courses here. And so, you know, one thing that translates to for you thinking about an application is that your application will be read by people who take the time to really read it and think about what it means. And so, as Andrew said, I mean, we recognize and we expect that lots of people have had a tough year or two, and that's going to vary, but you know, everybody's been disrupted in some way. But in some ways we're have the luxury, as it were, to kind of actually look at the individuals and the applications properly, and kind of look beyond just simply the numbers that are on the page, and we really do take the time to do it. And so we'll look at your application and what that tells us about you as a student, as an academic. And so, you know, as Andrew said, I hope you know, like, the message in a way is like, do you trust us? So, you know, if you're thinking about applying but you're not sure about what the application will look like given the circumstances of the year, I guess know that we're there to, you know, and really paying attention to what you're putting on the page in your personal statements, in the grades as well, and what the school says. So the application, we're able to look at the application as a whole.
I think a good question to pick up on, sort of following you there, Nick, is sort of questions around, well, how much is this weighted, or you know, what score do I need to get on this particular admissions test to, you know, get an interview? Perhaps maybe if you'd be happy to discuss a little bit about actually how you go about weighing those various elements of an application, and you know, what is it that actually makes for a strong application? Or else it's a very broad question, but hopefully it means you can go in some interesting and different directions.
Thanks, Hannah. I think one of the key things to say about admissions, really just picking up on what Nick was saying, is that we have an enormous amount of material and information on every single candidate that applies. And we recognise this involves you jumping through a number of hoops, and it's a lot of work that you're putting in, and we really appreciate that. But it also means that we're able to weigh up all of the information and see a whole picture. So, you know, yes, your grades are important. Yes, the teacher's reference is important, but we've also got your personal statement. We've got admissions tests in many subjects of the ELAT test in English, but we're never seeing any one of those pieces of information in isolation. So we're always able to calibrate how you've done in the admissions test with the piece of writing that you've submitted, which we can also then think about in terms of your personal statement. So this gives us a really good view of you as a whole, which means that, you know, if there are areas where you feel less confident, or you feel like you have done less well than you would have liked, well, we're still seeing a whole picture. So I think it's important not to get really hung up on one particular aspect of an application, because we're able to see the whole thing. Nick, I don't know if you want to come in on that.
No, nothing to really add, except so there's certainly, the way we do admissions in psychology has not been that there's a sort of threshold that you have to pass absolutely in a particular thing. So there's not, so you could certainly, there's information often out there about success rates that people have, so what proportion of our applicants that have been successful in the past have got, let's say, a certain number of 7, 8, 9s at GCSE and in these subjects, but it's not, we don't have a specific threshold. So, what we're looking for is people who obviously have an academic, the kind of academically are going to enjoy and succeed here, and other aspects, signs of that people kind of really love their subject. And that's another important aspect that comes through in people's application, through the personal statement, through the way they approach the questions that we ask in interview. So, in Laura's case, it might be kind of a close reading of a poem, as I've seen in sort of practice interviews before, or in our case, thinking about a psychology experiment and its meaning for how people behave in the world. So we get lots of different kinds of information, like the paper grades, which we take into account, obviously, and test scores, but we also kind of have a sense from the interview of how you approach the subject and what your background in thinking about why you want to apply for this subject might be. And that interest and love of the subject is obviously an important thing for when we expect our students to be studying sort of 30, 40 hours a week for a busy term here. So you really got to love your subject as well as kind of being good at, having good grades in previous school exams.
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's just been said. I would just add a couple of other things that are sort of picking up on Nick's last point. One phrase that I sometimes think of when thinking about what we're looking for is authentic interest. I mean, when we say you love your subject, I think it's really important. But the reason I use the phrase authentic interest, which doesn't contradict using the word love, is that, if you love your subject so much that you literally never give any time to it at all outside the classroom, then one might question how much you really love it. But if you're really interested in it such that it actually matters to you enough to make some time and space in a week to think about it, to put yourself to the test a little bit, to develop some of the skills, whether that's in mathematical extension work, whether it's in some demanding reading, which you actually engage with in a pretty critical kind of way, whether it's doing a little bit of research to get a sense of other resources and ideas and questions that might be out there and then picking through some of them, whether it's learning a very specific skill that might be a programming language or whatever it might be that bears upon your course, then you're moving from kind of the general enthusiasm into something that's a really sustained and authentic interest. And when you're doing those things, whatever they might be, then what you're actually doing as well is giving yourself something really interesting to talk about in a personal statement, putting yourself in a position where you're sufficiently experienced that you're likely to perform better than you might have otherwise in a written test, and gearing up to speak with that authenticity and experience in an interview, and to be able to take on board the kind of new problems that are presented in a test or an interview, because you've got that bit more experience of how to deal with the new within the context of your subject, because you've just given yourself more examples of the new along the way. And I'm not now talking about any specific supercurricular activity or even any specific amount of time, but I'm just sort of raising the fact that the more time you're able to spend in conversation with your subject, often just on your own, or developing skills that's directly relevant to your subject, because they're the things you actually need to be able to do it, the more likely it is that absolutely everything else will follow positively. And the thing that will follow, the most important thing that will follow positively from all of that, is that you'll actually be a really good student and you'll have a really good time. Because remember, this isn't about getting you through a door. I mean, it might feel like that, but it isn't about gaining admission to any particular university. It's about gaining admission to a university that works for you, doing the right subject, and then being able to enjoy your subject and kind of flourish in it and feel that you're doing good stuff. And sometimes that good stuff is going to be really hard and frustrating. And other times that good stuff is going to be brilliantly exciting and incredibly rewarding. But I think that's the prize. And so, what are we looking for in students? The kind of behaviours as well as the kind of interests that are supportive of all of those things.
Thank you. I think that's a particularly... Sorry, Nick, you go for it.
Okay, so I was just going to add, it relates back to what we were talking about tutorials earlier, and would somebody who maybe is a bit more shy or less confident enjoy tutorials? I think because we do our best to pick people who are really interested in the subject. A lot of the tutorial discussions take care of themselves. I mean, sometimes if you've got a tutorial at 9 on a Friday morning and people have been out the night before, not every week everyone's entirely switched on. But generally, I think having those conversations isn't hard work for a tutor, and people feel because they're interested in the subject. So if I guess part of what you're doing with your application is saying why you're interested in the subject and what you want to apply. And if you reflect on it and think, if I think of this as from a psychology perspective, it's like if I'm interested in psychology and I'm interested in how to understand the mind and human behavior and how that relates to what's going on out there in the world, I want to be discussing it, and so I tend to find that that's what drives the conversation, and that's why, we certainly do have conversations with students about maybe feeling more confident and contributing more, but generally it's not a big issue. And I think that it doesn't come from the wanting to just talk for the sake of it. It's wanting to kind of engage with the ideas that are there that drives those tutorial discussions.
So Laura.
Yeah, I can just add one extra point, sort of following on from what Andrew was saying about authentic interests, is to talk about what you're genuinely interested in. That's what I want to hear about. On a personal statement, I'm not looking for you to have read specific authors or in particular areas. If you're following your own interests in the subject beyond what you've been doing in school, I want to hear about it, whatever that might be. So always be honest about those things. And then, because you'll always talk enthusiastically and brilliantly about the things you're genuinely interested in and have thought critically about. We're all working on all kinds of different things. Just to give myself as an example, as well as working on late medieval religious women, I've just been writing a podcast about the dragon in The Hobbit and Tolkien and fantasy literature. I also work on the 20th century novelist Daphne du Maurier, who, when I went to university and did my applications many years ago now, she really wasn't considered to be a great novelist. She was pigeonholed as a romantic novelist. But I put her down on my personal statement, and I said I was passionate about her, and I wanted to tell the tutors why I thought she was so great. So, whatever it might be that you're genuinely interested in, whether that's George Eliot or detective fiction or science fiction or whatever it might be, if you've got a genuine passion for it and you're thinking about it, tell us about that. And those conversations we're always so excited to have.
Hannah, I know that we're on the clock and it might be that there's a few technical questions you want to get us through. Do you want to throw some quick fire questions at us and maybe just pick one of us and we'll try and give you some quickish fire answers to cover some ground?
Okay, well, quick fire question for you, Andrew, is how many students are there generally in a year at University College?
In rough numbers, plus or minus, we're kind of 120, 125 undergraduate students, and then 70 or 80 postgraduate students as well.
There's a question which I'm kind of happy to actually quickly answer, that was about accommodation and whether University College provides accommodation for every year. So the quick answer to that is that yes, Univ is very fortunate to be in the position that we are usually able to offer accommodation for all 3 or 4 years of undergraduate study with us. The question, actually, I'm not sure if you will be able to answer this, but there is a question about how many choral scholars there are at University College. I don't know if that's something any of you be placed to give an answer on.
It's in rough numbers about 20. Sometimes we have choral scholars, we have volunteers as they're called, so students at other colleges singing in our choir, but in rough numbers sort of 20-ish at any one time. That's not 20 per year, that's overall.
Perhaps the other question I might sort of pick up on, but tweak slightly, was asking about, what is computer science in particular here, like at Univ, but I think I might broaden that out to say, because really what it's getting at is, are subjects different within a college, like across colleges, or is applying for one subject, will you have a broadly similar experience at different colleges? I don't know, maybe we'll have to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a really quick answer if you don't mind. I don't want to speak over my colleagues. The short answer is that your experience is going to be pretty common regardless of which college you're at. In some subjects, there are minor variations, and that's because a tutor at a given college might have a particular set of teaching expertise, and they might particularly want you to do a paper in their area, an option in their area in the first year. Not because they think it's the most important thing to do, but because they, as your college tutor, really want to work with you closely in your first year in order to get you going on the teaching and learning journey. So there's a few little variations like that, but they're very, very minor. And if you want to find out about that, just look at each college's website, because if any college is doing anything which is a bit different from the course norm, they're going to tell you. But in most cases, none of us are.
I think other than that, we've either directly answered all the questions, or we have answered a question that's very similar to the one that's been asked. So I might just, so where we are drawing to the end, very quickly ask if you have just each a couple of words of advice or wisdom for Year 12s. They're about to go on their summer holidays. UCASL really kicks off for them in the autumn. Is there any sort of, words of wisdom or advice at the end?
I'm not sure that I attribute to myself words of wisdom, but I would say that it's more common that people don't quite aim as high as they should than that people aim too high. So feel free to be as ambitious as you possibly can be in at least a couple of your UCAS choices, because as long as you're sensible across a spread of choices, there's very little to lose. And as far as we're concerned, the things that we're most looking for are all to do with what we've been discussing today, and not some of the other stuff that you hear about, where you're from, or what you want to do professionally, or who you know, or what your extracurricular interests are. We really want people who want to work with tutors in the kind of way that Nick and Laura have just been describing. And people like that come from all sorts of different backgrounds. And some of them have got a huge amount of personal ambition. And some of them just want to spend 3 years working in a really close way with their subject. And you know what? That's plenty enough ambition for us.
Yeah, absolutely, completely echo what Andrew said. Just get reading, get researching around your subject, find the thing that you're passionate about, and pursue it. And yeah, very best of luck, and be ambitious. I know it's a really difficult time for everyone at the moment, but it's also hopefully an exciting time to think about applying for university courses where you can study the subject you love with fellow students who love it too, and with experts who are really keen to talk to you about it. So just go for it.
I'd just say the same thing. Yeah, if you're doing anything other than getting a well-deserved rest over the summer, it's do things that don't feel like work. But because if it's fun and you're enjoying it, it's exactly Laura's point. What the sorts of things we want you to be doing.
Yeah, I think those are all absolutely fantastic points. And I'm aware that we are now kind of at the 1:15 mark, so we'll draw it to a close there. If you're watching this live, or if you're watching this sort of shortly afterwards, then tomorrow, so that's Thursday, the 1st of July, there are going to be some typed Q&As where you can chat to some of our tutors. And there's also going to be an opportunity for another live stream to ask current Univ students about their experience. If you're watching this much later, then please do feel free to get in contact with me at access@univ, so that's univ.ox.ac.uk, and you can also find my email and phone number on the University College website. So I just want to say thank you again to our fantastic tutors for answering all your questions, and thank you for the questions, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.